Russian newspapers are aimed primarily, of course, at a Russian audience. But this article in today's Nezavisima Gazeta feels different. It's by the paper's owner and editor-in-chief, Konstantin Remchukov, about Putin and Russia today, what the West needs to know about the special military operation, Russia's war in Ukraine, and ending hostilities. So, what does Mr. Remchukov want the West to know? He claims that Putin himself takes all major decisions based on his skills, competence and own sense of historical responsibility. He argues that the task Putin's faced since 2014 to provide security for Russia and defend Russians and Russian speakers in Ukraine has become existential for his time in power. He cannot hand over power to someone else before this issue is resolved with binding international guarantees. Vladimir Putin may see this as existential, but after more than 2.5 years of war, has the full-scale invasion of Ukraine really boosted Russia's national security, or that of Russian speakers in Ukraine? The author continues, Putin's not about to step down. In early September, a schoolgirl in Tuva asked the president, "How would you spend your day if you were an ordinary citizen, not president?" Putin replied concisely and clearly, "I find it hard to imagine this now, to say, what if?" This is the most important message of recent times, to his own people and those outside, that when planning for the future, factor me in as Russia's leader. In this way, Putin brought back down to earth from the clouds the many Western politicians and opposition experts who claim that as long as Putin's here, there's a problem. Putin goes, problem goes. Putin is here. This is interesting. Remchukov thinks that it's time Russia stopped believing the idea, once spread by Brzezinski, that Russia's greatness depends on unity with Ukraine, as if Russia's great power status would end if Ukraine was removed from Moscow's sphere of influence. Today it's clear that Russia exists independently of how close it is to any one country or group of countries. That may be clear to the author, but there's little sign the Kremlin sees things that way. And he goes on to claim that today Russia recognises that a large number of people in Ukraine support the current Ukrainian authorities, consider themselves Ukrainians and don't want any future with Russia. And by doing so, the Russian leadership recognises Ukraine's statehood. When the narrative spreads in the West that Moscow wants to destroy Ukraine as a state, this clearly does not match today's reality. But if that were the case, how come senior Russian officials have talked openly about ending Ukrainian statehood? Former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev said back in March, in Sochi, one of Ukraine's former leaders once said, "Ukraine is not Russia. This concept must disappear forever. Ukraine is of course Russia." And in July, in response to NATO insisting that Ukraine was on an irreversible path to NATO membership, Medvedev posted, "We must do everything so that Ukraine's irreversible path to NATO ends either in the disappearance of Ukraine or the disappearance of NATO, ideally both." Final point from Konstantin Remchukov. It seems to me that today the question of a new international order providing equal security to states is just as topical for a critical mass of countries in the West and the East. The key question is whether a new international legal framework for peaceful coexistence can be created without doing so on the ruins of a Third World War.